Hi everyone, welcome back. So I hope you enjoyed some of those employer booths. So now you can see that I've been joined by even Kudzai from PwC. So Kudzai is a senior associate within the audit area of PwC. So Kudzai is going to talk a little bit about her career there, and then we'll get an opportunity for Q&A as we sort of come to close. So if you've got any questions, pop them in on the right hand side. But Kudzai, over to yourself.
Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. And just to give you a brief introduction of who I am and how I got to where I'm at the moment, my name is Kudzai, as Anthony has said. I started my accounting journey perhaps during my undergrad. So I did my undergrad in accounting and finance, and then I moved on to do a master's in finance and accounting, which seems counterintuitive, but it really helped in then doing my exams later on. So that's how I kind of got an understanding of what accounting was or what auditing is, because you tend to hear people say they're in audit, but you're not really sure what it is that they do. But I then did a couple of internships while during my undergrad. So my internships were in different lines of service. As you may know, there are different lines of service within accounting firms. You may have audit, you may have deals, you may have tax or advisory. So I did a couple of those, and I then landed on audit, which was the most challenging for me. I'm a person who enjoys things that challenge me. So audit seemed like the best fit. So once I was doing my master's, I did my master's in Glasgow. And when I started applying for jobs afterwards, PwC seemed like the best place for me. And this was because of their work environment, their diversity and inclusivity. And during that, I spoke to people like such as this event, you meet people who work in the firm and you find out what it is that they do, how they do it, what the culture is like. And you then tend to find what fits you and what doesn't. So eventually I did apply for the graduate scheme. There were different schemes available to me at the time. There was the Women in Business scheme and the Black Talent in Business. I then opted for the graduate scheme in audit because that allows me to do my professional qualifications. So these professional qualifications differ depending on what line of service you do. I am with the Institute of England and Wales, currently working towards the ACA qualification. If you're interested in tax, there's a tax qualification. And if you're just interested in finance, there's a finance qualification as well. So depending on what your interests are, there are various exams that you can write to become chartered in that area. So while working at PwC, I'm in my third year now. So I started in September of 2019 in audit. So once you start as an associate. And most people think when you start a job, it's very overwhelming because you're not entirely sure what it is you're expected to do, who tells you what to do from 9 to 5. And those are questions that were running through my mind as well. However, when I started, what I feel my employer does best is giving training very early on. So once you join the firm, you don't necessarily start working. You go through different sorts of training, whether it be audit training, how to use the systems, or just understanding what accounting is and what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. So fundamentally, you do that for maybe about 2 weeks. You get used to how everything operates within your line of service. You meet people, and those people tend to be people you will rely on more so throughout the journey of your career. So this training that is provided to you could be both internal and external. So you're then trying to balance your work and your exams. However, firms tend to offer support in that area where you're not working all the time. So you have 2 weeks where you're perhaps working on a client, and then you have another 2 weeks that you're in college and you're studying towards your exams. I'm not too sure how familiar you all are with the ACA qualification, but where I'm concerned, I have 15 exams that I have to get through. And in your first 6 months per se, you might write 6 of those. which does sound daunting. And I can admit when I heard it at first, it was definitely daunting. However, there are structures in place within the firm to support you in that. So you will have days off where you're not actually working on client side, and it is encouraged that you don't reach out to anyone in the office, you don't do any client work, and solely focus on your studies. And you write those exams and you get your results. So the support structure is there. Currently, I am 9 out of 16 exams through, which is great. The support has been amazing. And there's a strong focus on mental health as well, which I found to be truly supportive during my time in writing exams. So at the moment, I was given the opportunity to defer a certain number of exams to focus on my well-being, which I really did appreciate. I'm not sure how many employers can say they allow people to take time off to really focus on your mental health and then focus on exams when you feel like you're ready to do that and you can perform at your optimum. So that's me at 9 out of 15 exams. It's challenging, but I've been told it's worth it. I'll get back to you once I am at 15 out of 15. Hopefully that will be next year. And just on what PwC does in terms of diversity and inclusion, I think for the most part, we've heard and seen the conversations around Black talent within the audit profession, professional services, finance, however it may be, where we do see that we're significantly underrepresented in these spaces. And I think post summer of 2020, the conversations were definitely happening within our firms and our offices to understand what has been done, how it can be done better, and what other opportunities there are to focus on nurturing the Black talent and making sure that we're represented in our offices and our spaces and places where we're engaged in, essentially. And I think the most fundamental thing that we have done since then is an initiative that is called Color Brave. So Color Brave is a mandatory meeting per se, or gathering where each firm, or each office rather, because we do have offices in different cities, takes time, about an hour and a half each month, to discuss something that has to do with diversity and inclusion. And this could be race, it could be gender, it could be equality, it could be disabilities. Anything that you feel could be a difficult conversation to start within a professional space is a conversation that is had within those spaces. And I think what's so beneficial and good about it is that everyone is encouraged to do it, regardless of your skin color, depending on what topic is being talked about in that week. So we could be talking about race and microaggressions, and regardless of whether you are a person of color or not a person of color, these conversations are happening. And you then tend to find where people are either scared to ask questions, have that space, safe space to ask these questions, or people who are unaware are then taught that, oh no, I have probably been saying this to someone, not realizing that it's a microaggression, but because a spotlight has been shone on it, they're kind of aware and they're taking steps to unlearn the biases that they might have had and learning how better to broach the subject. So as opposed to someone asking me, for example, what my name is, or butchering the pronunciation completely, everyone now knows how to ask, okay, Kudzai, how do you say your name? And because it's in a foreign language, people might then be prompted to ask then, oh, where are you from? And depending on where you are from or what you identify as, that could really come across as, well, I'm from Manchester because I live in Manchester. And a microaggression that stems from that is, oh, where are you really from? So conversations like that, where you know not to ask those kinds of questions, has really come up. And as a person of color and as a Black person, I feel more comfortable knowing that my colleagues are aware of what could be offensive and what would not be offensive. And just similarly to that, because we work with different sorts of clients in different areas. We have offices up here, up north in Manchester and Birmingham and Leeds, and you could have clients in cities and towns that you've never heard of. And in the event that you come across a situation where you have a client that could potentially speak to you in a certain way as a person of color, there is support as well within the firm where you can bring that up and know that you will be taken care of. So it's not something that will be brushed across as, oh, you may be too sensitive, but they do take these things very seriously and are willing to support you in whatever way should something like that come up. I think as well with diversity and inclusion, what the firm has done and which are opportunities available to anyone in the audience as well are the different types of schemes that you may have. So like I said earlier, I started in the graduate scheme, which is quite diverse, I suppose, depending on the office that you're on. But you understand you do things differently in grad scheme, but then while you're working in the teams that you're on, you have different other schemes that are available to you. So like I mentioned, we have the Women in Business scheme, which fosters women in the profession, because in as much as we are moving forward and we are in 2021, women are in the minority in financial services and professional services. So this scheme is then open to women in their first year and penultimate year as well. And these opportunities could lead to internship offers and placement offers that would be available to anyone who's interested. Additionally, what we do have is a Black Talent in Business scheme as well, which are people that I do work with on a day-to-day basis. Again, this could be anyone in the university years where you come onto it, and what they're trying to do with this scheme is have more diversity and push Black people to join the profession as well, because we are in a minority. And I think the reason why you would find us in the minority is some tend to not want to be in spaces where you feel like you might be the only one, which is definitely a consideration I did have when I was applying into audit, more so because I was applying into a regional office. You tend to find more Black people in a bigger city such as London as opposed to Manchester or Leeds, so that was definitely a consideration that I had. But as we move forward, you then tend to find that there is an effort that people are making to make sure that, okay, people are represented, everyone is represented in this office and in this profession, which fundamentally is what the scheme does. So we do have those for university students. However, if you're a school leaver, we have opportunities that are available to you as well. So you could join the firm as a school leaver and you will be working as an intern, or you could be full-time as well. And what you find is, regardless of what scheme you do join, you're doing the same work. So if I'm a first-year grad scheme and you're a first-year school leaver, we will have the same responsibilities. We will have the same training. You might assume that each firm has its own working structure or own apps that they use, which is true. And you're given the opportunity to learn those things. So there isn't a difference. You don't see a difference in the office between a first-year school leaver and a first-year grad scheme. Everyone is given the same responsibility and the same respect as well. And I think what the firm does very well is it doesn't emphasize hierarchy. So in our offices, how it works is anyone sits wherever they want to. So you have situations where you might be sitting next to a partner, because our partners and directors don't have offices either. So you have that opportunity to not only learn from your direct superior, but also someone who is the head of your engagement. And with that, that builds on your confidence, that builds on your work output, because you're able to have these conversations. And those conversations could potentially be professional or personal, where you might work through what career trajectory you want to focus on. So I have conversations with a partner in our office who works part-time because she just chooses to do that because she can, and she has a family that she wants to run and children that she wants to watch grow up and interact with and speak to and hang out with, essentially. So she has that time, and she's been given that flexibility to work and be a mom at the same time. So those are considerations that you might have, that you might not have, but the space is there to have those conversations. So going forward, hopefully, I will qualify as an accountant next year. The work is challenging, but you enjoy it. You work on different clients, you interact with different people on a day-to-day basis, and you just expand your understanding of the world in a conducive environment and an employer that truly cares. I know people say the employer cares, but I can vouch for my employer. And if you have any problems, you can definitely take it up with me if you don't have the same experience. I think at this point, we might start taking questions with Anthony.
Cool. Thanks for that, because really good insight. And I think at the beginning you mentioned culture, and just there at the end where you talk about the partners and directors, sitting openly, which, I mean, saying it out loud, it sounds like that's how it should be anyway, but in lots of organizations, that's kind of not how it is, right? And they're trapped in the corner, and they just walk in, walk out. And so I think that in itself, it kind of says a lot. So no, thanks for that. I think I really liked, when you touched on the open forum, I forgot, is it Colour something? The open forum?
It's called Colour Brave, yeah.
Brave, yeah. I thought that's because, and you touched on it as well in terms of sometimes people don't have the conversation because they're scared to ask a question or they're scared to do whatever it may be, and therefore it's kind of put into the corner. But it's really good to see that PwC are having those conversations, and I guess make people curious as well to kind of learn there, but go away, learn some more, speak to different colleagues. So that's good to see. And I think you kind of touched on it, because interestingly, I think often when we think about race in an organisation, we think about it for that organisation. So you think just PwC, but as you mentioned, you work with clients, and actually you could be based at a client for months. Their culture matters too, right? So it's good to see that there's something in place at PwC that kind of, should something go wrong there, that there's a process in place, and actually your employer, your direct employer, it's not going to have any of that. So it's good to see. I was intrigued, and I can see a question on this as well, but you mentioned you're on exam 9, or you've done 9 out of the 15 exams. Yeah.
Yes.
So firstly, what kind of support has been there for you with what you're doing? Because that must take a lot of time and effort, right?
So the way our calendars are structured, in your first 6 months, so if you join in September as an autumn intake, you're expected to write 6 exams by December. So essentially what is done is you might start with exams in your September and October months, so there is no client work at all, and you do it through a college. So with PwC, we work with Kaplan, and I know other firms might have BPP as well. So what you do is you actually go into a college setting, and you're in class, and you have a tutor, and you're given all the materials that you could possibly need to get through that. So you go through that perhaps in a 3-week period. You go into college every day, and you work through it from 9 to 5, as you would do if you're perhaps in high school. Not more so university, but more so high school setup. And you learn what you need to learn. You're given time off to then study for your exams, maybe a week before your exams, and then you write your exams the following week.
Okay, that's good. So you kind of get, sometimes it's kind of difficult to balance work and right. So it's good that you kind of get given that space. And when I was listening to you talk, one of the things you said that around being conscious that you might be the only one, and you yourself, you thought that. So I was just wondering, what made you go from being conscious of that and it just being something that might have deterred you from, applying or whatever it may be, to actually, thinking, I want to apply because that's where I want to go. What kind of things, how did you handle that, I guess?
I think initially when you're applying, you just have to hope that you have a strong support system around you, because it could go good or bad. You're really not sure what you will be walking into. But then when you have events like this one, where you actually see that your profession that you want to enter into is represented, you know that you have an ally in the office. It might only be 2 people, but you have an ally in the office, someone who you feel comfortable speaking to. And you're like, okay, I might feel uncomfortable because in my cohort, I might be the only one, but you might have a senior associate or a manager who looks like you and you feel comfortable speaking to them.
Okay, sure. No, and I think about some of the other talks you spoke about the importance of networks and building your networks, and I guess that shows in itself that whilst there might not be someone sat next to you, if you kind of get out and start speaking to people, you might start seeing some of these people.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So some of the questions in the chat then. So the first question here that I see is, would you consider going into a different business area?
I would, and it definitely is something that I'm currently thinking about because in PwC we have a transfer window. So similar to a football transfer window, we have one for lines of service when you become a senior associate. So you could switch from audit to advisory or to consulting. So I'm currently considering moving to advisory. So the opportunities are there. You don't necessarily have to wait for a transfer window. You could apply internally as well. So the opportunities are there on a rolling basis.
Okay, I quite like that, a transfer window.
They try to be quirky, don't they?
Very cool. Okay, and then you spoke that you did. You spoke about doing a master's. Would you recommend that something that other people did, or?
It depends, to be completely honest. So, if you're looking to do the accounting qualification, you don't need an accounting background. So I have colleagues who did geography and history and English at A level or at degree level, and they still came in and started doing the accounting qualification. And I tend to think that if you don't have an accounting background, you tend to do a lot better in the exams, only because you don't go into the preconceived notion of what you may have learned. So not necessarily doing your master's. If you want to, I would suggest doing it, but you don't have to.
Sure. Okay. Sounds like there's lots of opportunities for development. So the masters might tire you out. We've had a few questions around inclusion and diversity at PwC, but I know you've touched on that. One of the things I was just wondering if you could share a bit on is, so is there an opportunity, so you as a Black colleague at PwC, is there an opportunity for you to help shape different things that the organisation does for Black colleagues?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we do have, even within, so what, like the Color Brave that I spoke about, or mentoring schemes, or just being on color councils, for example. So we have student councils, we have peer councils as well. So depending on what grade you're at within the firm, there's a council that sits on it that reports directly to the diversity and inclusion team. So whatever is happening within your peer group, for example, because that's the most direct contact you have. If someone brings something up, regardless of whether they're on that council or not, that is then taken up to the powers that be. So, for example, we have a movie series that has started. We were showing movies that impact society, different groups of society, whether it might be religion or disability or whatever it is. Someone came up with the idea that, okay, let's watch these movies. So, for example, next week we have The Theory of Everything, which you wouldn't necessarily think is something that the firm would want to watch. But because it highlights a man who was in a wheelchair, because it highlights Stephen Hawking, that then shows something that most people would not even consider. So that would have come from an AS1, an associate one in their first year, who then brings it up and the firm then implements it.
Okay, that's really, because earlier on as well we heard about the importance of being able to sort of advise and consult the organisation on that. So good to hear that. And a different question to that now, but in terms of how you work, so you mentioned the different offices earlier, and I know that we were talking about it off stage in terms of Belfast, for example, but how much of your time is spent in the office versus kind of working virtually?
So what we have now done is a 60-40 split. So depending on your work week, or whether you work on clients, or whether you're just doing planning, for example, where there isn't much client face time, you could opt to do 3 days at home and 2 days in the office, or vice versa. Or if your team feels like it's easier to coach you through the work that you need to do, you might spend more time in the office. So, for example, this week, I've been in the office Monday and today, and then the rest of the week, I will be working from home. So I think there's that flexibility now where you are trusted and you are empowered to make the decisions that are best for your work environment, how you learn, and what's best for client output as well.
Yeah. Okay, no, sounds like a good mix. And a different question here is, what are the challenges that you faced initially, or even still, I guess, in your current role?
In my current role, it changes. I think because you might work on one client for 2 weeks and you move on to a completely different client in the following week. So we could take a tech company and then the following week it might be utilities. So if you look at those, their revenue, for example, if you just take something as simple as their revenue, it's completely different. So it's trying to learn those systems that they use. But I think also on a person-to-person basis, because you work with different managers or different partners, it's learning how their working style works. So you could have someone who is not very chatty at all, and you're not sure how to manage that. And I think just understanding what you're meant to do and expectations. I think learning people's expectations while you're working with different people is quite challenging. So it's something that takes a bit of getting used to. I think only in my third year am I learning, okay, I need to ask people what their expectations are from the jump, as opposed to trying to figure it out on my own and then having to take 10 steps back a week later because you didn't ask what someone wanted. And I think more so the other thing, because we're balancing working from the office and working virtually, is having boundaries. Because if you're working at home, people can't see you working. So they assume, oh, you don't have a workload. So you might find yourself at 6 p.m. still working and accepting work. But essentially, in actual fact, you need to set the boundaries. And I think as a Black person and as a woman, you have that argument in your head as to, oh, I need to work twice as hard. So do I take on the extra work or do I not? But I think as you progress, you then tend to find that you do need to have those boundaries. And in yourself, you need to figure out what those are and then express them to the people you'll be working with.
Sure. Okay, then. Sounds like I think we're forever learning, right? It's kind of like things that you can take with you, but no, it's good. And you touched on it then, actually, because as a Black woman, and there's this topic of intersectionality, I guess. Mm-hmm. You at PwC, how does it feel being a Black woman?
I think I dreaded it. I'm not gonna lie. I definitely dreaded it when I started because I think there's an expectation. It might not be explicit. I think it might be an inherent thing that people have where because you're in the minority or because there's just one of me, you need to show up and show out because you need to create a path for people behind you. So that's definitely something that I had to deal with when I first started. But then you tend to realize that everyone is doing their best. And as long as you're doing your best, you'll be okay. I think we do put pressure on ourselves if you're in a minority because you then put yourself in a position where you want other people who look like you to come up behind you as well. You want to bring those people with you. So you want to create a good rapport across the network so that people know that, okay, if we do hire someone who looks like her, we're going to get the same standard of work. Or if I slack off, the representation might not change at all.
Yeah, and sometimes that can be quite a lot of pressure, actually, especially if you're leading the way and you've got all that on your shoulders. So at PwC, have you got kind of a network of other Black colleagues that you lean on, or go to support, or even just events, and how do you find that useful?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. No, good. I love it. A network. Everyone should have it.
Networking is important. I mean, we have a group. We use Google within the firm. We have a group of all people of color. So everyone just puts in information. If you need a mentor, you can find one in there. If you just need someone to talk to. So if I find myself in London over the weekend and I can't get into Manchester, I just go into the London office and I know that there might be someone who I can speak to or someone I can sit to through that forum as well.
That's useful. So a few more questions that we have here then. So just in terms of the application process, I guess, that you went through, what tips and advice would you give other people that are maybe just starting on that journey now?
I think give it time. So I started my application in September of 2018, and I only got my offer in January of 2019. So you need to be patient. I know everyone currently has a spreadsheet on Excel that has all the grad schemes that you're applying to. It's stressful, but just be patient. And I think the most important thing, like with this forum, if you have people that you can speak to, because you tend to find people within the firm are connected to people in recruiting as well. So if there's something that you might need to know that is not out there as you might think it is. If you have that network or people that you engage with, they might give you that information as well. And with assessment centers, just know the company that you're going for. So if I'm here and I tell you that we have a relaxed culture in the office, I wear jeans and sneakers on a day-to-day basis, you kind of know how to answer the questions in assessment centers and how to conduct yourself, because those are things that they would be looking for, someone who's comfortable around different people and willing to have those conversations, for example.
Good tips there. Thank you for that. And working at PwC, obviously, it's a really big organization. What do you think some of the advantages of working for a bigger organization are?
I think the opportunities for growth more than anything. So I know if I wanted to stay in the firm to partner level, for example, I know exactly how long that's going to take. I know what work needs to be done and what the progression looks like, as opposed to someone who might work in industry. So you might join a firm in industry and you might want to work up to FD, so financial director, but those positions tend to only have availability if that person leaves the firm. But then you have people a generation before us who stay in the same company for 20 years. So are you going to become financial director, whereas your colleagues in financial services or in a firm know that after 6 years, I might actually be a manager, regardless of who stays or who goes.
Okay, interesting answer. Interesting answer. Okay, and then just a couple more, I guess. So you mentioned around the assessments themselves. So you got 9. You're number 9. Right, I'll get that number right. Number 9. Mm-hmm. How have you found the experience in the assessment itself? So I know you've passed, but how have you found the experience of that?
It's challenging. I think balancing work and the exams is quite challenging. But you're given the opportunity so we have a resit policy, for example. So if you fail the first time, you are allowed to sit a second time. So there is that room for, okay, if I made a mistake here, I can do it again. So you have that as well. And because we take mental health so seriously, we are aware that doing both things can affect you in any way. And because we're still in a global pandemic, you know what I mean? So even that affects people in different ways. So for example, I have deferred my exams. So 2 sittings of mine, I deferred them because I found that working from home and being away from family, because I'm Zimbabwean, was taking its toll on me. So I was allowed that time. So about 5 months of not sitting any exams, to then wait and then sit my next sitting. So that support is there. And we have career coaches, people that you can speak to at any time of the day, whether it be professional or personal. So if you're having challenges in college, that's the first point of contact that you will have. And they will have a pathway that you can follow or someone that you can reach out to help with whatever situation you may have in the lead up to your exams.
Thank you for that. And yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've not just been working from home, we've been surviving a pandemic, you know.
Yes.
So the organisation around you has enabled you to kind of do what's best for you in that sort of time, you know. And so the final question really kind of relates to what you just said, and I don't know if it's the same thing or if they're slightly different. But the question is around mentors, and have you had any mentors that have helped you in your career today?
So luckily, I come from a background of accountants. So I have had that network passed down to me through my parents. But once you start in the firm as well, because at first you are given a career coach, and a career coach is probably someone who's 2 grades above you. So I'm a senior associate and my career coach is a senior manager. Okay. So that is someone who I can speak to, someone who's been in my position and someone who understands the pressures that I'm going through at each stage. So you have those from the first day that you start in the firm. And then as you go forward, there are then Black mentors that you can have within our Black network within the firm, where you might be partnered up with a director or a partner. And those are people that you can then speak to about your personal, or more so your professional progression, and how to balance the challenges that you might have with the pressures that you might feel, like we spoke about earlier.
Cool, okay. And if people weren't as lucky to have their parents who have the background, I guess, would you, is it quite easy to find a mentor, would you say? Are people quite willing to
People are definitely willing to help. I find more so now, people are willing to help because when you look at it, I think the average age within financial services apparently is like 34. So if you have people who aren't 60, people know what you're going through and people are willing to help. Because I think before there was a culture of, well, I went through this, so you're going to have to go through this as well. But now more so in our millennial and Gen Z generations, people are like, okay, I had it tough, so I'm going to make sure people who come after me don't have to go through what I went through and don't have to make the mistakes that I did.
Okay, that sounds really positive.
Yeah.
I think we will call it time there. So thank you so very much for that. Really, really insightful, both on yourself and PwC as a whole. And I want to say good luck with the rest of your exams.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully, by this time next year, you might come back and tell us about that you got 15 out of 15.
Hopefully, I'll definitely do that.
Cool. Thank you very much. So thanks everyone for joining this session. So just now we've got some time for networking. So again, if you go to the employer booths, and you will be able to speak to some of the different employers, and then we'll come back to JSK. So thanks very much.